It's 12:05 in the afternoon here on 90.3 FM. It's Wednesday, and that means it's time for Helping Seniors of Brevard. Kerry Fink is the host of the show for today, as he is every week, unless we have a guest fill-in. But nonetheless, Kerry is here, and I always like to say we get a daily double with Kerry. Not only is he the host of the show, but the proud executive director of Helping Seniors of Brevard. So let me say hello to Kerry Fink and our special guest this afternoon, our good friend Bill Johnson.
Yeah, thanks, John Harper. It's always good to be on the radio right here on 90.3 FM WEJF. We gather around the radio every Wednesday lunchtime. And welcome if you're listening online, WEJF.net, or if you're just catching this as a podcast, because we make these available each week wherever fine podcasts are found. And I was thinking, John Harper, as you were talking about Daily Double, we kind of get that with elder law attorney Bill Johnson.
That's right.
Because not only has been a friend of helping seniors going like literally all the way back with Joe, sort of like you, when even back in the days when Joe was building Brevard Alzheimer's, but he is a board certified elder law attorney, which puts him like cream of the crop.
And that is a daily double.
I think that's a daily. Welcome, Bill.
Thank you, Kerry.
Actually, before we have a really good show. I'm calling this subtitling this breaking news because I have breaking news about the 8th annual Helping Seniors car raffle. So I'm going to say something about that. But I also figure it's going to be breaking news because when I was emailing with Bill, I said, what should we talk about this year? And he goes, let's talk about a legislative update. Because as you know, Bill is the really kind of sought after in all of these legislative moves, especially when it comes to the elder law parts of it. And so both in terms of commenting on maybe pending legislation or looking over things that are coming up, that's going to be part of what we talk about on today's show. Before we get there, though, I do want to share breaking news about the 8th annual Helping Seniors car raffle. This also involves elder law, board certified elder law attorney Bill Johnson, because he is now the first official pickup location for Helping Seniors tickets for the car raffle. He's got them, folks. So if you call his office, you can.
Quite an honor.
Yeah. Well, he's number one. So, this is going to be fun. We haven't even announced all of the cars in the car raffle. We had the pleasure of being out Saturday at the Trinity Wellsprings Church Higher Power Car Show. And it was our first chance. It's kind of become our unofficial soft open each year because they kind enough to invite us out. And we were out there with a Mazda 3, which is it's a beautiful little sedan, really sporty, really neat, really elegant. And that's one of the cars that you can get. It's actually 6 cars in this year's raffle, and we haven't even announced them all. But the other car that we had out there Saturday, everybody knows, it's the Mitsubishi Outlander Sport, because that, John Harper and Bill Johnson, if you remember, was what our winner chose last October when we pulled Diane Pelak's winning ticket. She said, I want the Mitsubishi Outlander, and she is roaming around town and enjoying that vehicle even now. So all this is going to wind up on Sunday, October 27th. So get that date on your calendar. Sunday, October 27th. We're going to actually do this in the afternoon. So daylight on all sides, make it easy for everybody to get to the museum, out of the museum. And we're just going to have a great Sunday afternoon there, 1 p.m. to 4 p.m., Sunday, October 27th. And ticket sales are now open. So you can come to the Senior Resource Center, 1344 South Apollo Boulevard. And we're on the second floor there, and get your tickets. And now you can also go to the law office of William Johnson, because he will have them maybe even as early as later today. So thank you, Bill, for always helping us on this. We're going to actually, one other thing before we get into the meat of today's program, I want you to, if you can, put Saturday morning, the 25th of February. So the 24th of February. I'm always getting these dates mixed up. But it's the last Saturday in February, because we're doing an open house at the Senior Resource Center, which we renamed to be Joe's Senior Resource Center. after our president and founder, Joe Steckler, and we had a great naming ceremony with him there on his 90th birthday back in December. But we're going to have an open house there and a car show on that Saturday morning. So there'll be lots of good freebies. There's going to be coffee and donuts. We always have some food trucks out there. Bill Antonetz, who puts together some of the finest car shows, is going to have lots of classic cars out there for you to enjoy. But also, we're going to have all 6 choices from the 8th annual Helping Seniors car raffle on site. So it's going to be a big morning out there, and I ask you to put it on your calendar. So hopefully we'll see you there. You can always call us for info on anything that you're hearing. Maybe you didn't get a chance to grab a pencil and jot everything down, but that's why knowing the Helping Seniors info number is so important at 321-473-7770. I'll say it again, 321-473-7770. 7770, and you'll get Nancy or Karen, and they will be happy to get you pointed in the right direction. Or if you just need more information, say, I heard them talking about this on the radio, but I didn't get a chance to jot it down. So we'll have more things to talk about that are going on at the center as we go along on the radio show, but I wanted to take this opportunity to kind of dive right into this. I guess, Bill, as I'm following this, we're talking about the Florida legislative session, which runs loosely January to March, something like that?
This year.
Oh.
It alternates.
Okay.
So one year they start early. They start in January through March. And then in the next year, they start towards the end of February and run through the end of March, April.
So I don't want to, I was thinking about this because I guess am I saying this right? Because I kind of think of myself as kind of like an outsider trying to figure this out. But everything that happens legislatively for the entire year in the state of Florida, as it pertains to Florida laws, that all happens in this 2 or 3 month period.
Correct, but they were filing bills as early as October last year. And then they started committee meetings, I think, in December.
Okay.
So it is actually longer than actually when the session is in.
But this is really when these laws are made or changes are made to the law. Is that the right way to think about it?
This is when the sausage is made.
As they say. And you followed this for years, because I can think back so many years. We always have a program about this. Seems to be give or take this time of year. And you always kind of keep your finger on the pulse of what's going on here, because one of the things we've talked about in so many shows, it does seem like typically Florida is very favorable for seniors in terms of the laws and things. I think about things like homestead exemptions and things like that, but it also seems like everybody's working to always make it better too.
True. Very true. Seniors vote.
Yeah.
So that keeps the legislature on their toes. And, they always look to protect our seniors. We tried to do that in innumerable ways. But, yeah, the seniors vote. They are a very large contingent in the state of Florida. So they do have a lot of sway.
Yeah, before we actually dive into the actual mechanics of what's going on there, I just want to bring this point up because we've talked about this on the radio many times. You, as a board-certified elder law attorney in your practice, we've talked so many times on the radio about how many people are moving to Florida, and the population is just increasing right and left. And typically it's a lot of seniors saying, okay, I'm done with the cold weather. I want to enjoy sunshine. And then your role as a board-certified elder law attorney is you'll sit down with folks when they come into the state and help them review documents and things. And I think a lot of times the things that may have been like normal in other states, they find out, well, Florida is either a little different and maybe even more favorable in a lot of cases.
True. Florida is very, debtor-friendly, which is kind of unusual. You wouldn't think we would be, but we have a lot of exemptions from creditors' claims, including the one you mentioned, homestead. We have a lot of programs that aren't available if you go one state north or one state west. They don't have anything near what we have available for seniors in Florida. So again, it's we have such a large demographic, and so many people retire here. That's very true. Also, a lot of these things are governed by state laws as opposed to federal laws. So when you go from state to state, things can change drastically.
Yeah, I know that's one of the reasons we often talk, like one of the recommendations when we get into these shows, we say to people, so like, it's a good idea to call your office or check the one senior place calendar, because you do a lot of seminars and things like that. And again, it's because you don't want to leave. I think if you're new to the state or you're new to being a senior, I guess the way I would put it is you don't want to leave anything on the table, right? Because if you don't know that there's a protection or an advantage or something that might be beneficial for you and you don't know about it, certainly the government is not going to step up and go here.
And if you're expecting your neighbor who just moved from New Jersey to fill you in,
not going to happen.
Not going to happen. You're probably going to get a lot of wrong information.
Yeah, that's why it's so good, and we'll make sure you get an opportunity to get Bill Johnson's information as we get a little bit deeper into the show. But let's talk about what's on the calendar.
Well, there's a lot, though it has not been as busy as we've seen it in the past. But as of the end of January, or towards the end of January, there are 1,806 bills filed.
Oh, my goodness.
So that's a lot. And quite frankly, if you file a bill now, it's never going to go through, because once a bill's filed, it then gets assigned to committees.
Wow.
And let me take that back. Once you have an idea for a bill, you have to get that into bill drafting, which is a department of the legislature where they actually put it in the form of a bill.
Okay.
And that takes time because, as you can imagine, there are all these bills queuing up.
Yeah.
So sometimes it takes a month to get through bill drafting, the first come, first serve. So, you have to start that process back, August or maybe even before then.
Wow.
To get the bill through bill drafting. Then once it comes out, you have to have sponsors. Mm-hmm. We have a House and Senate just like the federal government, so you have to typically find somebody in the House and the Senate to sponsor your bill. And the senators are allowed to sponsor unlimited amount of bills. House members, I think, are limited to 6.
Oh, wow.
Don't quote me on that. But so they can't file more than that. And there's more, obviously, House members than senators.
Right.
But, you get your sponsors, then it gets assigned to the committees.
Okay.
And each bill has to make it through 3 committees. So if you have a bill, it's got to go through 3 Senate committees and 3 House committees.
Wow.
And then if it makes it through that gauntlet, then it gets to the floor, and then it gets voted on. If it passes that, then you're hoping your companion bill in the opposite chamber passes. And then the Senate and the House, if the bills are slightly different, they get together, come out with the uniform bill. I believe there's one more vote on that, and then it gets forwarded to the governor for signature. The governor once it gets forwarded to the governor has, I believe, 30, maybe 60 days to sign it. If he does not sign it, it is automatically dead. If he does not sign it in that time period, it actually becomes law. But he can veto it. In Florida, we have a line item veto, so he can veto specific parts of a bill without actually killing the whole bill. Or sometimes he just signs it.
Wow. When you were talking about the sausage-making process of a bill, it's like, my goodness, that's exhausting just listening to you recite all that has to go through it. If you think about it, then it's almost miraculous that anything moves through.
Correct. And I think, in any new law, you have to have some scrutiny.
Yeah.
So that's generally how it works. There are ways to waive rules and things like that. So if there's something everybody agrees about, you may just push it right through to the floor.
Yeah. Well, one other thing that I wanted to just ask you about before we actually talk about what's, kind of on the docket, if that's the right word, but it also seems like I've known you long enough, and we've talked about this long enough, that occasionally somebody will put together a bill and it works all its way through, and then a year or so down the road, they realize in practice that there's some shortcomings, and then it seems like they're trying to re-engineer or rework it. Is that part of this whole process too?
That happens quite a bit. You pass a law and maybe there is a flaw in the way it would be practically implemented. Sometimes there are a lot of unintended consequences that happen.
Right.
And they have to go back and rethink it. But yeah, a lot of times it gets retweaked.
Yeah. Wow. So it's an ongoing process for sure. Well, what are we talking towards this time?
Well, and generally these bills deal with the ones I'm going to talk about at least deal with seniors,
right,
or the subject matter of what elder law attorneys deal with. And one of them is what we call supported decision making. And that is where if you have a guardianship over somebody, generally in a guardianship, once a guardian's appointed, they make all the decisions for the person who is their ward.
Right.
And that's usually all the medical and financial decisions. However, when you apply that to people with developmental disabilities, we all know that there's a wide spectrum of those folks. There are some people who have Down syndrome who hold jobs and can voice their opinions. Autism has a huge spectrum. You have people who are very high functioning, drive cars, have jobs, do all that. And then at the other end of that spectrum, you have people who are bedbound and can't do anything. So for the people who are the higher functioning people, we wanted to give them basically a right for self-determination. So we do that with something called supported decision making, where you have somebody help them. Instead of taking away their right to make a decision, you have somebody designated to help them come up with their own decision.
Okay.
And it's a way to empower them. We've worked on this, by the way, for 3 years. It is not, I should say, it's not an elder law section bill. It is actually a bill, disability rights, Florida bill. But we've worked with them, tweaking the language to make it work practically.
Right.
And this year it looks like it's going to go through and pass.
Wow.
So that'll be fantastic. We also had a guardianship bill that was, for lack of a better word, loopy.
Wow.
It would have required the impaneling of juries to decide if somebody was incapacitated.
Whoa.
And then you would have to have rotating judges to hear different parts of the case. And there were a lot of things with that bill that practically did not work and logically did not work. So that one looks like it's dead on arrival because it hasn't made its way through any committees. So once, it doesn't get assigned to committees and doesn't get on the agenda, boom, it's virtually dead there. Because as I told you just a few moments ago, you have to make it through 3 committees.
Yeah, wow.
So that, another bill that doesn't look like it's going anywhere is the patient-directed doctor's orders. There is a similar bill called POLST, which is the Physician Life-Sustaining Treatment Bill. And this basically kind of goes around the living will and the do not resuscitate. So if you don't have one of these, the patient, or if you even have one of these, the patient could tell the doctor, I don't want life support continued if da-da-da. There's a lot of controversy. A lot of states have it, but in Florida at least it's run into some roadblocks, and it doesn't look like it's going to make it through. There is a Principal and Income Act bill that determines what is well, as the name implies, what is deemed principal? What is deemed income?
Uh-huh.
Why is that important? Well, if you're a lifetime beneficiary of the income of a trust, but somebody gets the principal at the end, what do we invest in? Income generating assets or assets that are going to accrue in value? And so that's kind of what it deals with mainly in the context of mortgages and a lot of other things. But I'm not sure of the status of that. It did have a House and Senate sponsor. The elder law section remained neutral on that. There is a bill about veterans long-term care facilities admissions. We have supported that bill. I believe that one is going through, so we'll have to keep an eye on that. There are, this gets interesting. There was a bill that was introduced to protect seniors so that if somebody at the bank thought you were potentially the victim of a fraud or a scam, they could freeze your account for a period of time until, either somebody came to the rescue and helped you. But the problem with, I think they wanted 30 days. The legislatures weren't so keen on that, giving bankers all that power to freeze anybody's account for no reason for 30 days. Or whatever reason they wanted to.
Right.
So it made it through, I believe, 3 committees in the House, but only 2 in the Senate, and it doesn't appear to be on an agenda for a 3rd committee meeting in the Senate.
Interesting.
So that may not move forward. And the reason that's interesting is the elder law section of the Florida Bar was proposing an amendment to that bill that would make it possible if in the context of an exploitation injunction that we can never find these scammers, right?
Right.
They're sending emails, they're calling or sending mail, and for generally most things in the legal world, if you're going to go after somebody or affect their rights, you have to actually physically serve them with a process server. Somebody's got to hunt them down, serve them with process. This would allow for an exploitation injunction that we could go and freeze the accounts with an order from a judge, but to serve the person who's trying to get the money out of the account, the one who scammed the person, we could serve them with, the petition and notice of the hearing via the same way they contacted our client.
Oh,
if we had a senior who was being subject to an email scam,
you could serve them by
we could just serve them because we're never going to find them.
Right.
They could be anywhere in the world. But we could serve them via the email address that they used, and boom, we can go to court and get an order.
We're talking with board-certified elder law attorney Bill Johnson. We're talking about the legislative session. We're going to be back in for the second half of Helping Seniors. Real quick, Bill, if somebody wants to get information about seminars and things you have upcoming or just good information, what's a good way to reach you?
Best is by phone at 321-253-1667.
Okay, we're going to continue the conversation in just a moment on Helping Seniors Radio.
Great music there to get back to the second half of Helping Seniors of Brevard with your host, Kerry Fink. Kerry is also the executive director of Helping Seniors of Brevard. And Kerry, always enjoy hearing that music. Everybody seems to like it.
Well, we call it the music of your life, right?
That's absolutely right. So let's, as much as we'd like to hear more of that music, we want to hear more of the conversation as well with you and attorney Jim Johnson. So let's get back to it.
Thank you, John Harper. Again, welcome back to the second half of the Helping Seniors Lunch Hour. Every Wednesday we gather around the radio, 90.3 FM, WEJF, and you can also hear us online at WEJF.net. And if you're moving right along on the podcast, thanks for staying tuned in. By the way, if you are on the radio, maybe missed some of the stuff that Bill and I were talking about during the first half of the broadcast. That's one of the great reasons why we always put this together as a podcast. We put this out on the Helping Seniors website, helpingseniors.brevard.org, usually within a day or two of the broadcast. And we do the same on our Helping Seniors of Brevard YouTube channel and our Facebook page, and every place that you would get a good podcast, you'll find us there. Any place from Apple iTunes to Spotify to iHeartRadio, just wherever you go. So our guest today, we're having a really good show, as someone once used to say on television, and that is because we're talking with board-certified elder law attorney Bill Johnson and of the law office William A. Johnson, PA, and we're talking about the fact that Bill, for years, has been involved in the legislative process with the elder law section of the Bar Association, and you've really kept your ear to the ground year after year as far as this time of year when the Florida state legislature is considering bills and things that are going to impact the welfare of our seniors.
That is correct. And then there's a reason we do this show usually about a month into the legislative session, because if we did this show in January of this year, I wouldn't be able to tell you what's going to pass and what's not going to pass, because we would have no idea what's making it through committees and what's not.
Yeah, but at least now, as you were explaining, because this year it kind of runs kind of January to March, so now you've got a sense, as you were describing in the first half of the show, all this really pretty complicated or complex process that a bill has to go through. In fact, again, that's another reason, if you didn't hear the first part of the show, grab this as a podcast and go back, because it's pretty amazing. I as you were going through it, Bill, I kept thinking like, wow, it's amazing anything ever passes based on that. But we covered also a couple of the laws or the bills that are in consideration right now, but let's keep going.
So we were, as I mentioned the first half of the show, we were trying to do an amendment for the service of process on people who exploit seniors.
Yeah.
And we're trying to tack it onto a bill that was about the protection of vulnerable adults, or specified adults, excuse me. And then, as I said, that particular bill is missing one committee meeting, so it may not get through all the hurdles this year. But there was another bill out there, a bill that deals with schemes to defraud, which would be another potentially a good bill that you could tack an amendment on. But again, when you go to trying to amend these things, you got to go talk to the bill sponsors,
right,
and find out whether or not they're willing to do that. We also had a proposed rewrite of the Baker Act and Marchman Act that was filed that would have revamped the whole thing. It was a total rewrite of those statutes. Baker Acts is where if you're a danger to yourself or others due to some sort of mental disability, they can put you in a facility for up to 72 hours, try to stabilize you. Then they have to have a hearing. There are three ways you can be Baker Acted. One is a physician can Baker Act you. Second way is a police officer can. And the third way is actually you can file a petition with the court and get a court order for that. And then after 72 hours, they have to have a hearing, and the psychiatrist testify, and the judge hears that of whether to extend that, do outpatient, do nothing, just send them home, or, worst case scenario, to the state hospital. But I can tell you, folks, our state hospitals for psychiatric services are booked solid.
Oh, my goodness.
Yeah, there is barely, I don't think there's any room at any of them. So that rarely happens. So usually it's one of the other three outcomes. That bill, I don't believe, has been moving, though. So, and that's not unusual. Sometimes you have to propose something 2-3 years, sometimes more, before it actually gets to a point where it can pass. especially if nobody's seen it before. So you're proposing brand new legislation, and then of course when you file it, then you get all the comments and people's different views of this will work, that won't work, things like that. And then you tweak your bill, hopefully make it better, and then refile it next year. And then sometimes the third year is the charm. That was the case with the supported decision making. This is the third year that's been proposed, and it really looks like it's going to go this year. So that's we have a few other bills that are out there. Some deal with community property rights. Florida is not a community property state. A lot of other states are community property states, and just by virtue of moving to Florida does not mean that your property that was community property all of a sudden is not. So it gets very confusing on how to deal with community property of people who move to Florida. There are, as I mentioned, the Principal and Income Act that deals, again, that's a technical bill dealing with how we figure out whether something's principal or income. There are quite a few. There's some bills that were called Death with Dignity. That does not appear to be moving. Let me have a look here quickly. I think that about covers it. So there are a few others. These are, and by the way, folks, as I mentioned earlier, we have, as of January 25th, we had 1,806 bills filed. Wow. I've only talked about maybe 10 or 15.
Yeah.
So there are a lot of bills that get filed. This year is low.
Yeah.
So, and I only follow the ones that deal with seniors or disabled individuals. Mm-hmm. So that's why my list is a lot shorter.
Right. I wanted to ask you, because you brought up something that I don't think we've ever actually really talked about, but you were mentioning this bill that had to do with community property rights, and you said Florida is not a community property state. And I thought, I kind of zeroed in on that because, again, like we started the show out talking about how many people move to Florida and don't realize that many things are different with Florida laws, really in a lot of cases for the better for seniors. Like we were talking about, the homestead protection offers a lot of protection for creditors that maybe you might not see in another state. But talk just a little bit about how that, because that just struck me. We've talked about powers of attorney work differently in this state because you have to be very, very careful to specifically give the powers that you want, and it's just so-and-so can handle everything apparently doesn't always work. So there are these differences.
So in my practice, I deal with estate planning. I deal with the incapacity planning documents like power of attorney, mm-hmm. healthcare surrogate, living will. I also deal with the Medicaid program, and I also deal with the VA aid and attendance program, and I also do guardianship. Now, of those, the wills, trusts, estates are governed by state law. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Of course, there are income tax and estate tax issues, which are federal law.
Right.
Then you get over to the incapacity documents, the power of attorney, healthcare surrogate, living wills. Those are all governed by state laws. Then you get to Medicaid, and even though Medicaid's a federal program with federally promulgated rules, it is up to the states to interpret those rules.
Wow.
And then and secondly, it's roughly 50-50 funded from federal and state funds. And then so you have that going on, that the states get to interpret it. And the states can also ask the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid for what they call waivers, which mm-hmm. means to deviate from the core Medicaid program that for long-term care only pays for nursing home care. So in Florida, you can get Medicaid services at home, assisted living, or nursing home. If you go to Alabama or Georgia, you can only get Medicaid money to go to a nursing home.
Wow.
So we've asked to allow us to expand our services, and we've gotten permission. Then you get over to VA benefits, which is an entirely federal program.
Right.
There's no state law involved with that. And then you come back to guardianship, and that's entirely state law.
Wow.
So in 1 year, I remember, I don't know, about 15, almost 20 years ago, the feds changed, came out with a new series of rules affecting Medicaid. The state made a major changes to the whole guardianship statute. And then the feds changed the way that we deal with IRAs, and also the exemption amount, the amount you have to be over before you pay federal and state tax.
Wow.
So in 1 year, I had to learn three whole new things,
Wow.
all at the same time, all.
Well, this takes it right back to, in the helping seniors world, Joe Steckler, our president and founder, has always talked about making an aging plan. We euphemistically call that getting your ducks in a row. But along the way, we've added a couple of corollaries, which include don't try this on your own, be wise like an owl, don't try this on your own. And we say that because, my goodness, when you start talking about the nuances, first of all, the nuances of navigating between state law and federal law, let alone when they start monkeying with things and changing something that you thought might be applicable. And then, like you said, you had to go to school on 3 different levels about it on that particular year. This is really why having expertise by your side is really so important in all this, Bill.
It's true. You really have to keep up to date. And I don't think people, when people come in and say, why are you charging this for just this, this piece of paper? There is so much that goes on
behind the scenes.
Besides I got to pay everybody who works and the overhead and all that, and carry insurance and pay for people's health insurance. Besides all that, there is also a whole core component is I have to constantly go to seminars to keep up to date so I don't make a mistake when I do that piece of paper.
That's a real point that you're hitting on, is because, so often people will see a TV commercial and it seems to oversimplify. Oh, you can just do all this, just click a few boxes and your paperwork's done and you're going to save all this money. And yet, how could you possibly think, even for a minute, that you would have the ability to sift through some of these nuances when you've spent about 2 minutes clicking buttons on your computer versus the kind of schooling and intensive study that you go through to make sure that you're up on whatever the last change was?
Yeah, I'll give you a perfect example. There is a national talk show host who I will not name, who is a money manager and is very famous and wrote a book. And in the book, she talks about estate planning, and you have to have a trust, and you have to get your house in the trust to avoid probate. And then it went so far as she came out with forms and stuff like that. But if you don't know how Florida homestead is affected by putting a house in a trust, you can make multiple big title problems, inheritance problems, property tax problems. Wow. And you have to know how all of that interacts.
Yeah. Wow. Well, that's really why it pays to really do this right, do this in advance, do it when there's not a crisis. And that's one of the reasons, Bill, as we always talk on the radio, you guys are really generous with your time. You do these seminars on a monthly basis at one senior place. We need to have you come do some actually at Joe's Senior Resource Center too. But if there's a schedule of these, and you cover like a whole bunch of different topics in those so people can kind of get up to speed.
Correct. We usually do 2 a month at one senior place, one on estate planning, one on Medicaid. We also do them on, believe it or not, pet trusts.
Wow.
Like a lot of people don't have kids and they want to leave the money for their pet until their pet dies. So there's a way to do that. We also have seminars on special needs trusts. So if you're leaving money for the benefit of somebody who's on public benefits, you need to know how that works. And then we do it on also veterans in attendance benefit.
Yeah. So, what's a good way to figure out when these are upcoming and get information, and maybe because these are free, right?
Correct. They can either call the office or they can contact one senior place. In some of these senior publications, they actually list the schedule of events at one senior place.
In Senior Scene magazine, for example, where you'll find your Helping Senior newsletter each month, we're the center section. There is a calendar that one senior place publishes in there as well, and I guess that's a good place to look for upcoming ones.
Yeah, I think the whole calendar is published in Senior Scene magazine. I know there is. I think it's a abbreviated calendar, maybe in Senior Life. But either of those magazines usually, and we just opened here at the show, the schedule of events at one senior place that was in Senior Scene magazine. So
So it's a good way. But if they want to just call the office and say, hey, what's upcoming? What are the dates?
Yeah, they can just call us at 321-253-1667.
And I also want to make sure that people know you have a really good website at floridaelderlaw.net. And the reason that I point that out is because you put, I always get the specific title of it, but you've done this for years, but it's like a little handbook that is a great place to start to get aware of some of the things that you want to be considering in your aging plan.
That is true. You need to get your ducks in a row.
Yes.
That was last year's catch line.
So the original theme is get your ducks in a row. Last year our theme was, be wise like an owl. Don't try this on your own. We're staying in the barnyard theme kind of thing this year. So this year is actually don't be an ostrich. Don't put your head in the sand. It's not going to go away, just by waiting it out. Go ahead and tackle this now,
Well, I think one of the biggest things we talked about, and I refer back to that Money Magazine article about people retiring, and, the number one concern was, I think, outliving your money or maintaining the same standard of life that you had in retirement that you had while you were working.
Right.
Way down the list, like at number 9 or something, was long-term care, which can totally wreck the boat for everything above it if you don't know what's going on or how to approach that.
Yeah. No, it's so true. Well, we've been having a great conversation with board-certified elder law attorney Bill Johnson, great friend of the Helping Seniors organization. Before we time out of today's show, I want to make sure I give you a couple of dates. So if you got a pencil and paper, jot these down. On Thursday, this is the last Thursday of each month, we do the Helping Seniors Wellness Series together with our friends at Care Plus Health Plans and Omni Healthcare. And this month is February, so it's Heart Smart Month. And actually, Tammy Lieberg with Practitioners in Motion is going to be giving a talk about that, as well as they're going to be doing free, no-charge blood pressure screening. So that's a great fun event, midday, 11 a.m. to 12:30 p.m., right there at Joe's Senior Resource Center, which is on the second floor of the Omni Healthcare building right there at 1344 South Apollo Drive. So that's a date, Thursday, the 22nd. You also want to keep in mind, like we were talking about earlier in the show, Saturday morning, February 24th, because that is, we're going to have an open house and we're going to have a car show right there on the grounds of Omni Healthcare there. They call it the Apollo Professional Tower, and it's got a big parking space, and no doctors and patients use that on Saturdays, so we take it over and make it a car show. And we're going to have all 6 of the cars in the 8th annual Helping Seniors Car Raffle there on site. Choose your adventure. You're going to see the cars. You can get your tickets. It's a great morning to meet all the great resources that are available throughout the Helping Seniors Network. We had great entertainment there. Actually, we call him Uncle Nick, but he really was a hit when we did this back in September, leading up to the car raffle. So what we figured we'd do the same this year. We do our official kickoff for the car raffle there that day, and it's a lot of fun. So you want to get that on your calendar. Saturday, February 24th, 8 a.m. to 11 a.m. Also, before we're out of time, I want to remind you, if you are a renter in Palm Bay, Florida, and you're over the age of 55, we are continuing with our Florida Bar Association Florida Eviction Prevention Project program, together with the City of Palm Bay and federal CDBG funds. So we will be meeting on Saturday morning, February 17th, for breakfast. We call it Breakfast with the Attorney. Attorney Frank Scaglione is going to present. And if you have not participated in this, we get really high marks from everybody who's been through the program. They say it's very useful, and it's absolutely free. But you have to call us and RSVP, because there's a very strict limit how many people and all that. So you have to call 321-473-7770. And just a last minute reminder, I want to make sure that you pick up both your free copy of Senior Scene Magazine, available at 500 plus locations around Brevard County. They usually print like 14,000 copies. I know we have them at the Resource Center, but I also want to encourage you to pick up your February edition of Spotlight Magazine, because we were so fortunate to be named the nonprofit of the month, and they did a nice little write-up for us in Spotlight Magazine. And so, Bill, as you know, as a nonprofit, you're always looking for every angle or every opportunity to let people know about your cause and get support. So we really appreciate getting the help from our friends Brian McDonough at Spotlight Magazine on that. Just really helps.
It does. It does.
So with that, one more time before we close out, because hopefully everybody did get that pencil down, but we've been talking with board-certified elder law attorney Bill Johnson, and he's been walking us through some of the legislative updates today. But again, we keep saying, don't try this on your own. If somebody wants to get in touch, find out about those seminars that you guys offer free of charge, or just, maybe a comment about some of the things we talked about on the radio, how do they get in touch with you guys?
Our phone number is 321-253-1667.
All right. Well, thank you, Bill Johnson. And listen, we encourage you, as this information is hopefully helping you as you make your own aging plan, we want to encourage you to stay involved with Helping Seniors. Lots of good information at helpingseniors.brevard.org. You can find everything we've been talking about, calendar of events, information about the car raffle, and about our 4th annual Helping Seniors Foundation Cruise, which is in full swing. Some great deals on that. We will go sailing with all our friends from Brevard County on Saturday. We'll be leaving on, the Sunday, June 9th, for a 7-night cruise. Great value, and it serves as a fundraiser for Helping Seniors. So you can get all that information at helpingseniors.brevard.org. Well, that's the time for our show today. So we look forward to seeing you back here next Wednesday at 12 noon, 90.3 FM, WEJF. See you then.